Welcome. I'm Carl Frederick, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project of the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I have worked in newspapers for more than 40 years as an editor and a reporter. 38 and a half of those years were at the Kenosha News. I am also a member of the Kenosha County Historical Society Board. We hope you enjoy these programs. I'm speaking with Ron Doerring, former president of the Kenosha Camera Club. Welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Tell me about the Kenosha Camera Club. It wasn't originally called a camera club, was it?
No, there actually were two clubs in Kenosha. The Kenosha Camera Club was a print club. They shot black and white prints basically until later color. The Kenosha Camera Club that we're speaking of actually started out in 1941 as the Kenosha Movie Makers. At that time, movies were the vogue. Hollywood's coming out with feature films and sound films, and everybody wanted to shoot movies. And so a bunch of people that came to Rhodey's Camera and Photo Shop, which was in the basement of his home at the time, they decided that they wanted to shoot movies too.
Who were the original people who wanted to create this club?
Oh, we had people like Louis Rasmussen, and then you had, I had to make a note because my mind's not what it used to be.
And then John Rhodey Sr.
Well, John Rhodey had the camera club, the camera store. You had people like Louis Rasmussen, George Mitchell, C.L. Baylor, Joseph McMarion, D. Cunningham, a lot of the big names, business people, doctors, lawyers.
Was there anyone who came up with the idea to say, hey, let's start a movie-making club?
Well, actually, they were strictly shooting movies.
Okay.
And what happened was that Les Lindstrom and Lou Rasmussen were invited over to Paul Vagansky's home. This was in 1940, late 40s. And Vagansky was a flower grower. He loved his flowers. And he had a display of dahlias. And he invited them over. Well, when they came over, he asked Lou Rasmussen to shoot movies of his collection. And that started the talk of having a movie club. So on February 6th, 1941, they had talked with John Rhodey at the office and met in his photo studio and decided to have a club. They called it the Kenosha Movie Makers.
Okay, so was it Hollywood movies that sparked interest of other people to make their own family movies?
I think that probably had something, and Kodak had the equipment, was selling equipment, and people wanted to record their family. You know, family doing the kids growing up, family trips, stuff like that. So they went into that, started shooting their own home movies. And at that time, movies were cheap. When I started shooting movies, it was like $1.99 a roll of film, and that was 16 millimeter. And then the processing was about $1.50. So it was cheap at that time. Money was cheaper. So February 6, 1941, they had their first meeting. And instead of Rhodey's Camera, which was a small studio, they decided to go ahead and move it to the Kenosha Art Museum, which today was the public museum, and now it's the Dinosaur Museum. Mm-hmm. So they met in the basement of the art museum. And they actually decided, oh, they're going to shoot like family gatherings. They had films of their banquets, picnics, other things that the club did, meetings.
So
they
was that
filmed all that.
Okay, so that was the kind of movies that
they
were being
shooting.
made at the
Right.
time.
Plus their own family films.
Okay.
And when they did trips, they would show their trips. Originally, they started out, the meetings were as convenient when they could do it. And then on September 1st in 1941, they decided to have monthly meetings. Well, when they did that, they couldn't hold everybody in the photo gallery, so they moved to the art museum. So they were meeting down there, showing their films, having meetings, teaching people how to do their films, because you had a lot of new people coming in. People
So there were people who were showing their films and people
that were coming in
instructing
just to see,
to help people do their own.
The movie makers, if anybody had a problem, you'd come in there and start discussing movie making. Well, then they'd find out the answers to their problems. So it was kind of like a class, a club, whatever, and an entertainment. Anybody shot some new footage, they wanted to show it. Well, then they came up with the idea of having competitions. Well, the first competition was won by a film called Honey Harvest, and that was done by Bill Vincent McCall. He did the first film. Well, Encyclopedia Britannica in Chicago saw the film, picked it up, and distributed it throughout the world to all the schools and science clubs and that. It was a story of the bees. Well, that progressed on. Another one, Lou Rasmussen, who was elected first president. Lou Rasmussen worked for the public museum. He did the travel logs. And his trips, he would make 16 millimeter recordings, and then he would show them at the auditorium, high school auditorium. They used to have the travel log shows. And he would show them in between other people that would come in. And when he passed on, somehow I obtained all his films, and I didn't know what to do with them. I gave them all to the art museum, which is the public museum.
Okay,
I don't know who has them now.
Did he make any special travel films?
He was the first movie maker, the first cinematographer to film the life of an Eskimo. He called the film Nanook of the North. Some Hollywood producer saw the film, obtained it, put it in the Academy Awards, and it won the Academy Award as the best documentary film.
Do you remember what year that was?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I do know that I had seen the trophy he got. That was before the Oscars. I had seen the trophy. I don't know what happened to his trophies. I imagine it's kept in the family. I believe he had sons and daughters. I'm not sure.
Okay. So was this strictly a movie-making club?
It was
And how
strictly
long?
movie making at the time. In 1945, one of the members, Arlene York, who was shooting 16 millimeter, was taking a trip with some people to out west, and she wanted to document it. Well, Kodak had slides at the time, and she decided that she was going to shoot slides because it was lighter equipment to carry, one camera. So 1945, she wanted to show it at the club. Well, the club told her, yeah, we'd like to see them too. So she showed her slides. Well, the other wives said, well, we want to show slides too. You know, we want to take our pictures and have competitions to show slides. So they decided in 1948 to switch the name to the Kenosha Movie and Slide Club. And that's how that began. Kenosha Movie and Slide Club stayed into business until 1972. And at that time, the Camera Club had ceased operation, and a lot of the still photographers wanted to join our club, but they wanted to shoot pictures. So then they changed the name to the Kenosha Camera Club. They assumed that name.
Okay.
And they accepted slides, prints, stereo, digital when it started coming out. Anything was invited to it.
Did any of these movies that were made have sound?
Eventually, 8mm came out with sound film and cameras. But the problem was it didn't last long because at the same time Super 8 was developed, which is a bigger film area which gave you sharper and better pictures, and they came out with sound film.
Okay.
So regular 8 sound kind of died off. Most of the members didn't shoot sound. They brought their sound on records. They played music in sections. They had dual turntables, and they would switch from one to another. And they also used this as background music for their slideshows. They used to put on movie and slideshows at the Lincoln Junior High.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about the competitions? When the competition started, what kind of categories?
Well, I'm not sure exactly when they started, but I think the meetings, they started competing with their film. In 1941, they did have movie competition, so that would have been later on in the year. They decided to compete, pick an award winner for the best film. And eventually it evolved into regular movie competition. They also worked with other camera clubs in the area.
Were there a lot of those?
Huh?
Were there a lot of those clubs?
Almost every big town had camera clubs. Chicago had about 4 or 5. And most of them were movie makers at the time. But then they had the printmakers too. So Kenosha area camera clubs, or Kenosha Camera Club, joined Kenosha area Chicago clubs, which had movies and slides and prints and everything, stereo. They joined them, so they competed with the Chicago clubs. Milwaukee had the Milwaukee movie makers. They competed with the Milwaukee club. They also presented programs to each clubs. They joined with their judges. When they had a club competition, you never used your members. You always got members from another club to come in and judge. And that's how they kept evolving.
So the competitions were local and regional, or did they expand to becoming
Well, the
much more?
competitions were local,
Okay.
but they had 4 other judges come in and compete for them. Eventually, some of these clubs, like Chicago Area Club, the Photographic Society of America, they opened competitions to anybody. So we had competitions from all over the world.
So were there any Kenosha filmmakers in these international
Oh yeah,
competitions?
they entered. They entered. I won quite a few awards with the Photographic Society of America and with CACA. Milwaukee, they didn't get involved that much with it. It was mostly local.
What kind of films were you making that won awards? What kind of things were you doing?
Travelogues, stories, documentaries. That's basically what movie makers were shooting.
Okay, when you say stories, what do you mean by stories?
Oh, we come up with scripts and have stories.
Okay, tell me a
I
little
made
bit
a film
about
of a man that had trouble getting in his house. His keys wouldn't work. He couldn't get in his house. Turned around and left. As soon as they closed the outside storm door, the darn house door opened up. Things like that, you know.
Okay. So
Another one-
were these involving other people as well?
Oh yeah, movie members were actors.
Okay.
They acted in a lot of the
So
films.
somebody filmed it, somebody wrote the script.
Yeah.
somebody
well,
acted in
like
it?
on this, I would write the script, I would film it, they performed, and I would do all the work.
How long were some of these films that were made?
Most of the films would run 15, 20 minutes, half hour. Depends on what we were showing. If it's a travelogue, it might be a 45-minute, hour film. But most of them were 20-minute, half hour.
And sometimes just kind of like a TV show episode.
We used to have 1-minute competitions. You had to shoot a film in 1 minute.
How
Put a
did that
filter.
work? I mean, what-
Actually, quite easy. There isn't much to it.
you have to have
Well, I
some
did-
kind of idea that's
You'd come up with an idea and make the film. And then they'd have a competition. Who had the best film? Who did the best 1-minute story. And they're still doing that. A lot of clubs are still doing that. In fact, I made a film on the history of World War II in 1 minute. Figure that out.
That's a lot to cram in 1 minute.
A lot of pictures go on, a couple of frames, it just blah, 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 the war was over. You know?
If only it would have been that fast. Did Kenosha ever hold any of these competitions, major competitions?
Well, we always had the competitions with the club.
Right, but
And
outside of that.
we'd show the films at the Lincoln Junior High Auditorium. The slides, we opened up a competition to other clubs. Well, eventually it evolved into worldwide. Clubs in Europe wanted to enter too. They would enter. They would get the information through the photo magazines, and they would enter.
They would enter the Kenosha Camera Club slide
International, Kenosha International.
Was this an annual competition for
It was an annual competition. We started out with maybe about 50, 60 entries. Eventually it ended up, we had about 400 or 500 entries from all over the world. A lot of foreign entries.
How do you judge these things? I mean, just to take over a weekend?
We would pick judges from, generally it came from Chicago, because they're closer. These judges would come over, slide competition judges would come and spend the night here. We'd set them up with a hotel room, and they would judge for 1-2 days, generally 2 days. And we have different categories, and they would judge and pick slides for these different categories. And then they would have to pick the best of the category, the best of the show. Best of the show would be all the categories. And they would pick these award winners. Kenosha eventually came up with a medal, which the History Center has. Came out with a medal designed specifically for Kenosha. Everybody wanted this bronze medal, so they would compete for it. And it got to the point it was getting expensive sending these medals overseas, you know. But, oh yeah, that's a lot of them.
Okay, and how long did the competitions last? How many years did this go on?
I'm not sure. It happened late 80s, early 2000s. Like I said, I gave all this stuff before to the History Center. I don't have any record of this anymore, and my memory isn't as good as it used to be.
So did the club celebrate a 50th anniversary, a 75th anniversary?
They did a 50th, and I believe we had a 75th. I think we had a banquet at the Elks Club.
Okay, so that would have been
75th.
2016.
So that would probably
did the club last much longer than that? Is it still in existence?
No, the club folded. It folded at the same time. Younger people would come to the club, and then they formed their own club because they didn't want to be with the old people. Mm-hmm. Our club had got down to about 5, 6 members, and they weren't active like they used to be when we were younger. The new club, Kenosha Club, I think they're called the Photo Techniques or something. I had looked at it up. It's on the website
today.
Yes, they meet at the Festival Grocery Store.
Yes,
they
it's
have
called
monthly meetings.
Photo Kenosha Group or something.
Photo Kenosha Group or something like that.
Okay, tell me about the advancement of the cameras and the film, and how that changed over time from what it was when you started or when the club started to how it became to what the equipment was like in the major part of the time.
Basically, you had the 16 millimeter, which evolved into regular 8. Regular 8, Kodak made a 16 millimeter film. They split it down the center. And what happened was you'd get a roll of film, a 25-foot roll of film. You'd shoot half of the film, flip the magazine over or the roll, put it in the camera, shoot the other half. When it went into Kodak for processing, they would develop the film, join the two ends together, and then you would have a 50-foot roll of film.
How long would a 50-foot roll of film last?
Roughly about 8-9 minutes.
Okay.
Depends on what speed you shot. If you shot silent speed, which was 16 frames a second, it would last longer. Most people shot home movies on 16 frames. 24 frames was sound speed. Very few people shot that until they came out with sound film. If you're going to use this film on video for television, you would shoot 24 frames because that was sound speed. If you were shooting for your own self, you would shoot it at 16 frames.
Okay, then how did the cameras evolve and the film evolve?
Well, you got your sound film, the cameras, which were one unit, and the soundtrack was on it, and it would record the sound. You'd have the microphone. A lot of people shot the cameras with the microphone by it. Well, it would pick up the chatter of the film. Other than that, you would add the sound later. Then you could cover up the sound of the projectors or the cameras, whichever one you were using. Then they evolved into soundproof cameras, but that was mostly 16 millimeter.
So how long was the 16 millimeter film being used?
It still is.
Okay.
16 millimeter still is. Well, some Hollywood film footage in the feature films was shot on 16. In fact, I understand some were shot on Super 8.
So what's the difference between a Super 8 and the 16 millimeter?
Super 8 is the smaller film, with the split film, but it's a bigger picture area, which gives you sharper and clearer pictures. Film stripe was on the side of the film. So on regular 8 and Super 8, the sound stripe was on the outside of the film. But they made the sprockets smaller, so you had different equipment to use, and the pictures were bigger, but you still had the sound stripe, which was 16 or 24 frames a second. 16 millimeter was different. It was the same with the stripe and that, but it was still the same size film.
And what about the cameras themselves? Did they change much?
Well, they progressed as the film did. Eventually, they went by they're still being used. And I understand that some company is making Kodak film again for movies, Super 8 and 16, and equipment for that film. A lot of the equipment, the older equipment, can use the film that's being made today. Then video came in, a lot of people switched to videotape. And after video, you came out with digital. So a lot of people today are using their smartphones to shoot film. The only big problem is most people don't know how to shoot film with a smart camera. Smart cameras, they use them this way. They shoot single pictures, they shoot vertical. They don't understand, we have two eyes. We see panoramic. We see 180 degrees. Movies have switched to panoramic to show the whole film. Regretfully for TV, they cut it sometimes and you miss half the picture, which was a disaster because some pictures required the whole scene. Today, if you take your smartphone and tip it outside and shoot at the widescreen, you'll get the whole scene. You see a lot of this on TV with the news where high school kids are shooting, and they're shooting this way, and they're going like this, trying to show everything. All you gotta do is turn the camera over on its side and show it, and you'll get the whole view. What can you say?
So you mentioned that there's a company that is bringing back some of this. Is this becoming popular? Did it ever go away?
Well, it's coming back. It never really went away. But they're finding out that film is still better than video. You can use video, but it's not as sharp and clear and depth that you have on film that you have on video. Video's flat because it's all digital.
Okay, so going back to the beginning days, why did this become popular? Was this like the only thing there was to do? Or?
Hollywood.
Hollywood was the reason.
But, you know,
wasn't it?
back in the 30s and 40s, you didn't have anything. I mean, you had dancing, bowling, church gatherings, and you had lay at home and watch the radio. Or in the summertime, you could go to baseball practice and football games, or you can go to ice skating, hockey. That was it. There was no television, no coffee bars, no hot dog stands. You had a restaurant. If you're lucky, you had a couple of restaurants. Eventually, as all this stuff after the war started building up and progressing, people started dropping out of picture taking and started doing everything else. They still did their family films and their travelogues. Hollywood had come out with motion pictures and telling stories. Well, some of these movie shooters says, hey, I want to tell a story too. So they come up with scripts and come up with their kids performing. Tim Lawler, who was a member of the club, he was one of the engineers at American Motors. He shot a lot of travelogues and a lot of family films. And he used his kids as actors. Well, he could. He had 12 kids.
Okay, tell me about today. How has that changed?
It hasn't.
Well, I mean, the idea of having more things to do. That is affected.
It cut back on the clubs. It cut back on clubs. Like I said, the younger people are back into movies again, because of video and Hollywood, and they all want to get into this. And they have the Camera Club in Kenosha. I don't know if they do movies. I don't think they do movies. I think they might do digital, but today, most younger people, they can't afford film. And film today is very hard to find. You have to go on the internet to get it, or go to the big cities and order it out of the big stores. But most people, they don't look at their family films anymore. And everything is on the cloud. It's on digital. But
so the club did finally die out. How many members
the club
were there
died
at the
out. We
end?
got down to about 5, 6 members. You had 3 members doing all the work. Like I said, the younger people, they didn't want to belong with old people. And they were more active. They wanted to go out and shoot pictures, which the older people were getting too old to do. So they left and started their own clubs. Well, the older clubs, they just, eventually everybody's dying off, they folded. Milwaukee, I know the Milwaukee Movie Makers ended, the Milwaukee Stereo Club ended. I'm not sure, they still meet with their people, but they don't have a club. Chicago, they still have CACA. I believe they still do movies. There's some of the people down there are shooting movies. Chicago has an organization called Chicago Film something. They're on the internet, and what they do is they've been collecting amateur films and club films, and they've been preserving them. And they have shows that they put on. They also collect university films, people that are out there shooting avant-garde movies, documentaries of Chicago and different organizations, and they're collecting those, and they put on programs.
Well, this is still an active
It's still
form
active. It's
of
still an active
entertainment.
form. Oh yes. In fact, it's coming back. More and more people, younger people, are shooting films. Now, a lot of them is digital, which is video, but there's also people still shooting motion picture film. They're using Eclairs, Aeroflexes, Bolexes. These are bigger cameras, professional cameras. They're expensive. And what they do is they rent the cameras from a rental place, shoot their films. They use lights, they use everything. They have regular groups going out and shooting films.
Are these heavy cameras?
Yes. Most of this stuff is done, it used to be on tripods. Now they have special units that you attach to your body, and you can go around with the cameras, and they're more versatile. You can get around more. It's progressed from the still camera on the studio tripod.
So you see a future in movie making on a
Oh, there's
amateur
still a
level.
future. There's a big future in it. Any young people starting out, they're getting more and more. They have movie classes at University of Wisconsin, Northwestern University in Chicago, Columbia University. All the universities have film classes. High schools have film classes. So they keep going. It's something that won't quit. Once Edison came out with making movies, everybody wants to make movies. Now they grow up watching video. Kids grow up watching the television set. They're used to moving objects, moving pictures. They want to do this. So it's a lively organization. Kenosha Camera Club, the photo techniques or whatever they call it, I've never been to any of their meetings. I've met some of their people that would come to the club, like the president at the time, but I haven't been to their meetings. I know there's one or two of our members have gone to the club. They've joined the club. We also used to belong to Racine Club, Racine Movie Makers. Racine Camera Club is still active. This club is still active. I think they're basically prints. They're not movies in Racine. They're prints and slides. And they have competitions. They still belong to Photographic Society of America. The Society of Amateur Cinematographers, I used to be a member of that. In fact, I'm a fellowship member. But they still have their stuff. It's Society of Amateur Cinematographers and Videographers. So they still have their competitions and that, but I haven't been involved in years. So.
Thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure being here.